Hello, Soul and Real Stories family. I hope you're all doing well. May God bless you with love, joy, and peace. I pray your days shine bright, your burdens ease, and your dreams come true. How did our last story touch you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly value them lately. I've noticed a drop in views, so if these stories have brought you comfort, please invite your loved ones to join us. You're more than subscribers, your family. Your presence means the world to me. Let's continue this journey together. Late at night, the city lights of London stretched across the ground like shimmering galaxies, reflecting through the glass windows of the towering Whitmore Tower. Inside the top-floor office, Oliver Whitmore stood silently, holding a glass of amber-colored whiskey. His gaze was distant, fixed on the brightly lit streets, but his mind drifted into the past. Just a few years ago, his life had been an unbroken string of successes, a path paved with glory and convenience, coming from a happy family. Oliver once believed that love was the most beautiful and enduring thing in the world. He had loved wholeheartedly with absolute trust, but Isabella, the woman he had once thought he would spend his life with, had betrayed him in the cruise. Remembered that fateful day, the day he walked into their shared apartment and saw Isabella in the arms of another man, his biggest competitor in the industry. Every sweet lie, every promise, had merely been tools for her to get close to him and use him. From that moment, Oliver realized that love was a luxury, a game he no longer wanted to play. Now everything he did was calculated with precision. His heart had turned to ice, and his mind had room only for numbers and contracts. But the dazzling world of the elite wouldn't allow Oliver to hide forever. And then the fateful bet took place. The grand gala at the Ritz Hotel brought together the wealthiest and most powerful figures in the city. Amidst the music and dazzling lights, Oliver carried his usual calm and cold demeanor. He didn't enjoy these parties, but they were opportunities to expand his business network. Beside him, Michael Donovan, his longtime friend from university, took a sip of his drink and smirked. "Alex, are you going to keep that serious face all night? You should learn to enjoy life a little." Oliver swirled his whiskey, his deep voice calm yet indifferent. "I enjoy it in my own way." Michael's lips curled, his eyes glinting mischievously, as he nodded towards the far end of the hall, where a group of young women were laughing and chatting. Among them, a woman with chestnut hair stood out. Her striking blue eyes sparkled under the lights, exuding a mix of allure and reckless abandon. "Evelyn Carter," Michael said, slowly watching Oliver's reaction. "She's the nightmare of high society. The wild Aries the tabloids love to chase." Oliver glanced at her briefly, his expression unreadable. "So what?" Michael raised an eyebrow, a sly smile forming. "I bet you can't turn her into a perfect lady in 3 months." Oliver set his glass down, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "And if I do, $2 million, Michael replied smoothly, his gaze challenging. Oliver knew he was stepping into a dangerous game, but part of him was drawn to the challenge. To him, Evelyn was just a pawn in a bigger scheme, a mere transaction. If he won, he would prove that there was nothing he couldn't control. "Deal," Oliver said decisively, sealing a bet that would change his life in ways he never anticipated. Across the room, Evelyn Carter observed silently. She was no stranger to the scrutinizing glances and whispers surrounding her. As the only daughter of a prestigious family, she had earned a reputation as a true rebel. Endless parties, extravagant shopping spree, and reckless speeding in sports cars. Everything was a carefully crafted facade to conceal a bitter truth. Since her mother passed away, Evelyn had been living in a cold mansion with her indifferent father and a manipulative stepmother. They never truly cared for her, seeing her only as a tool to further their wealth. And now her father was forcing her into a marriage with a man twice her age. For financial gain, she needed an escape. And when Oliver's icy gaze met hers, Evelyn realized she might have found a way out. Marrying Oliver could be her only way to avoid the arranged marriage. Even if she didn't believe in love, this deal might just be her salvation. A week later, in Oliver's luxurious penthouse, Evelyn sat across from him, her expression calm, arched an eyebrow playfully. "And what do I get after that? A sum of money large enough for you to live without ever relying on anyone," Oliver responded firmly, his voice devoid of emotion. Evelyn smirked. "Then we have a deal." She signed the contract, and as Oliver watched her elegant signature form, He realized that the real game had just begun. The Grand Imperial Hotel, renowned for hosting the most lavish events in London, was more splendid than ever tonight. White flowers adorned every corner of the grand hall. Mass meticulously detailed marriage contract lay between them on the table. 3 months. Sive crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the soft melody of violins filled the air. The long, elegantly arranged tables welcomed the city's elite, who exchanged curious and intrigued glances. The wedding of Oliver Whitmore, the young millionaire heir to the Whitmore real estate empire, and Evelyn Carter, the notorious wealthy socialite, known for her rebellious lifestyle, had been the subject of public fascination for weeks. Although the couple displayed no signs of affection, everyone understood that this was a marriage of convenience rather than love. Oliver stood firmly at the ceremonial altar, impeccably dressed in a classic black tuxedo. His expression remained unreadable, his piercing gaze fixed on the woman slowly walking toward him. Evelyn, adorned in a breathtaking mermaid-style wedding gown by a renowned designer, had eyes as deep as the ocean, reflecting a sorrow she could not disguise under the dazzling lights. Her beauty appeared ethereal, yet no one could deny that the same woman who had graced the tabloids with countless scandalous escapades was now stepping into a marriage neither she nor the groom truly desired. Among the guests, whispers filled the air. She's nothing more than a decorative accessory for Oliver. This must be an arranged marriage. Who actually believes they're in love? Evelyn overheard the murmurs, but she remained indifferent. Walking down the flower-lined aisle, she thought only of escaping the marriage her father and stepmother had arranged with another man. Oliver was her only way out, even though she knew he was only marrying her because of a meaningless bet. As their eyes met, both could read the truth in each other's gaze. This was nothing more than a transaction, a loveless deal. The efficient voice echoed with city, yet his words were met with cold indifference. Do you take this woman to be your wife? Oliver barely hesitated before responding. I do. And do you, Miss Carter, take this man to be your husband? A faint smirk tugged at Evelyn's lips, her voice laced with icy composure. I do. There was no romantic kiss, no affectionate squeeze of hands. Oliver slid the expensive diamond ring onto Evelyn's delicate finger with the precision of someone fulfilling an obligation rather than pledging a lifetime commitment. As the reception commenced, Oliver immersed himself in conversations with business associates, leaving Evelyn alone amidst unfamiliar faces. She held a glass of champagne, taking slow sips while offering forked smiles to the scrutinizing gazes surrounding her. She knew she was nothing more than a glamorous trophy, a tool Oliver used to prove that he could transform a reckless ace into a perfect wife. And as for Oliver, this was just another game to win. After the hours-long reception, Oliver and Evelyn finally returned to Whitmore Mansion, the grand estate standing like a cold fortress on the banks of the Thames River, its golden lights reflecting on the water like fragments of distant memories. Stepping into the honeymoon suite, Evelyn took in the meticulously arranged space. White roses, scented candles, and sheer silk curtains draped invitingly, creating an atmosphere of undeniable allure. Yet to her, it all felt hollow, devoid of warmth or meaning. She stood by the window, gazing at the dazzling London skyline. Dressed in a white silk gown, her delicate shoulders glowed under the soft light, as if they might vanish at the slightest touch. Behind her, Oliver loosened his tie, his eyes following her every movement with a mix of curiosity and something he couldn't quite define. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice deep and laced with an unmistakable possessiveness. Shall we start playing the roles of husband and wife? Evelyn turned her piercing gaze, meeting his scrutinizing one. A cold smile played on her lips, devoid of any affection. This role lasts 3 months, doesn't it? She replied, her tone filled with defiance. Oliver smirked, closing the distance between them with deliberate steps, his hand lifted, grazing her cheek, feeling the softness of her skin and the cool detachment beneath her poised expression. He had prepared himself to conquer a reckless socialite, a woman he believed was accustomed to luxury and indulgence. But as he drew closer, Evelyn instinctively took a step back, her eyes flashing a mix of defiance and something else, mockery. "I think you've misunderstood me," she said softly, her voice calm yet powerful enough to make Oliver pause. His brow arched in intrigue, a rare display of curiosity breaking through his usual composed demeanor. "Oh, then surprise me." Evelyn held his gaze, the depths of her blue eyes, unwavering, showing neither fear nor hesitation. "What kind of woman do you think I am?" Oliver, a spoiled easy conquest. Her question was sharp, cutting through his ego like a blade. For a brief second Oliver was caught off guard, but he masked it well. Evelyn took another step back, creating a careful distance, though the flicker of pain in her eyes did not escape his notice. "I've never belonged to anyone, and I am not as easy as you think." The revelation hit Oliver like a punch to the gut, sending a wave of shock through his carefully constructed perceptions. His hands, in the middle of undoing his shirt cuffs, froze midair. Evelyn was still a virgin. It was the last thing he had expected from the woman whose name was constantly linked to wild parties and scandalous rumors. A heavy silence settled between them. Evelyn could see the flicker of disbelief in his expression, and she seized the moment, her lips curling into a smirk tinged with irony. "Disappointed?" Oliver remained silent, studying her with an intensity that made the air between them thick with unspoken tension. He had severely misjudged her, and that realization stung more than he cared to admit. "I thought you were smarter than that," Evelyn continued, her voice laced with both bitterness and a vulnerability she tried to hide. Oliver's lips twitched, frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. He wasn't used to being wrong, especially about people. He took a step back, his voice lower, more contemplative. "Then why did you agree to marry me?" Evelyn crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes shimmering with a blend of sarcasm and resignation. "Because I needed an escape from the life my father and stepmother arranged for me." She paused, her gaze darkening. "You weren't the perfect choice, but at least you weren't as terrible as the man they picked for me." Oliver felt an unexpected twinge of irritation. He had never considered himself as anyone's second option, let alone a convenient escape plan. His pride bristled at the thought. The room grew quieter, the weight of their words hanging in the air. Evelyn stood still for a long moment before turning away, her shoulders trembling slightly, yet she maintained her poised exterior. Leaving Oliver alone with a whirlwind of thoughts, he watched her retreating figure for the first time, feeling as though he had lost control of the situation. He thought he could manipulate. Evelyn was no easy game, no mere accessory he could shape to his liking. She was a mystery, a challenge he had not anticipated, and that made her all the more dangerous to him. Oliver exhaled deeply, leaning against the cool marble wall, his dark eyes fixed on the ceiling. The wedding night had not gone as he had expected. Instead of an effortless victory, he found himself standing at the edge of an intricate chessboard, where Evelyn was no pawn but a formidable queen in her own right. As for Evelyn, staring out at the twinkling city lights, she silently vowed that no one, not even Oliver Whitmore, would ever have the power to dictate her life so easily. Right after the wedding, the Whitmore estate, a magnificent mansion nestled along the banks of the Thames, became the place where Evelyn had to adapt to her new life. The exquisite classical architecture, towering walls adorned with priceless oil paintings, and endless corridors that felt like an inescapable maze. Everything was too perfect, too orderly, too silent, a stark contrast to the vibrant and chaotic life she was used to. Evelyn felt as if she had been imprisoned in a luxurious gilded cage where freedom was nothing more than a distant dream. Everything in the estate operated like a flawless machine, from meticulously prepared meals to afternoon tea served right on schedule. The household staff worked in silence, their every move filled with cold precision, and Oliver, her husband, was at the center of it all. He didn't need to raise his voice. A single cold glance was enough to ensure absolute compliance. Evelyn had never liked rules, and this marriage was no exception. She continued to make headlines in the tabloids with her late-night parties, endless shopping sprees, and high-speed drives in her luxury sports car, completely ignoring the icy stares of Oliver watching her from a distance. She deliberately provoked him, testing his patience to see where his limits lay. But Oliver was not easily swayed by her antics. He was a man of discipline, always maintaining an unnerving calm in the face of her rebellious acts. Every time she returned home drunk, or found herself at the center of yet another scandal, he would simply sit in the library, scan through the bold headlines, then fold the newspaper without a word of reproach. It was this cold, detached silence that frustrated Evelyn the most, yet beneath the surface Oliver began to notice something different about his so-called rebellious wife. There was more to her than met the eye, something he hadn't anticipated. One evening, while strolling through the estate, Oliver unexpectedly caught sight of Evelyn in the kitchen, quietly slipping a bundle of cash into the housekeeper's hands. Her voice was soft, but every word carried a rare sincerity. "This is for your son's tuition fees this year. Please don't tell anyone. It was for me, okay?" The housekeeper looked at Evelyn with deep gratitude in her eyes, but Evelyn only offered a gentle smile before turning away, as if what she had done was of no significance. Oliver stood silently behind the door, watching everything without revealing his presence. On another occasion, he accidentally discovered Evelyn discussing with the butler about donating a large quantity of warm coats and shoes to an orphanage. Under the alias of a friend who wishes to remain anonymous, Evelyn never sought recognition or applause for her deeds. She simply carried them out quietly, as if they were second nature. But what surprised Oliver the most was one late night when he saw Evelyn's car pulling up in a rundown neighborhood on the south side of the city. She didn't step into a fancy bar, nor did she attend an elite gathering. Instead, she quietly got out of her car carrying bags filled with food and warm blankets, which she handed out to the homeless under the dim street lights. She crouched down, listening to their stories, her deep blue eyes filled with genuine empathy. Standing from a distance, Oliver felt a strange sensation stirring within him. So Evelyn wasn't the selfish socialite he had always assumed. There were hidden layers to her, layers of kindness and compassion that she never sought to display for the world to see. Gradually, Oliver's curiosity turned into something else, something he couldn't quite define. He started noticing her more, paying attention to the small details he had previously overlooked. Evelyn, the woman he once thought of as nothing more than a decorative piece in their meaningless bed, was now a mystery he couldn't take his eyes off. Evenings at the mansion slowly began to change. The once silent dinners, filled with tension, gave way to brief but increasingly frequent conversations. Oliver often found Evelyn sitting by the window, quietly sketching scenes of the city at night. Sometimes he would sit beside her, without saying a word. Their shared silence carried no hostility, no barriers, just an unspoken understanding that neither could explain. Evelyn, too, noticed the shift in Oliver's gaze. He no longer looked at her with cold detachment, but with a flicker of something softer, something she couldn't quite define. His attention was no longer obligatory. It felt genuine, as though he was beginning to see her in a new light. Yet she kept her guard up, afraid to believe that their marriage was anything more than a temporary arrangement, a game she couldn't afford to lose. One evening, as they crossed paths in the library, Oliver finally broke the lingering silence between them. "Why do you do all these things without letting anyone know?" he asked. Evelyn paused, setting down the book in her hands. A faint, almost amused smile played on her lips. "Because I don't need recognition," she replied simply. "Helping others makes me feel like I'm not completely useless." Oliver studied her for a long moment, a strange feeling stirring in his chest. For the first time, he realized that Evelyn was nothing like the shallow, reckless woman the tabloids painted her to be. She had depth, hidden wounds, and an unspoken loneliness buried deep within her, and more than anything, she was unlike anyone he had ever met. Somewhere along the way, Oliver found himself no longer viewing Evelyn as a challenge to conquer. Instead, she had become an enigma he wanted to understand. A woman whose allure wasn't in her glamorous appearance, but in her complex and layered soul. And it dawned on him that perhaps their marriage wasn't as simple as he had once thought. Their marriage, which had once seemed like nothing more than a simple contract, began to change in subtle ways that neither of them fully realized. Oliver found himself spending more time observing Evelyn. He noticed that her presence in the mansion didn't just bring trouble, it breathed new life into his otherwise monotonous world. Before Evelyn, the mansion had been nothing more than a grand, lifeless structure, But now the sound of laughter, the occasional arguments, and even her defiant glares made everything feel more alive. Evelyn, too, started to see Oliver in a different light. He wasn't as cold and ruthless as she had once thought, though he maintained his distance. There was a quiet concern in his eyes that she couldn't ignore when she was surrounded by a mob of journalists bombarding her with cruel questions. Oliver had appeared, taking her hand and leading her away, with a firm resolve shielding her from the public scrutiny. Evenings at the mansion gradually transformed. Initially, their conversations were nothing more than polite exchanges, but over time they began to share pieces of their past. Evelyn told Oliver about her mother, a gentle woman who had passed away when she was young, leaving her alone in the grasp of an indifferent father, and a stepmother who cared only for wealth. For the first time, Oliver opened up about his own wounds, the heartbreak of his past relationship with Isabella. What once seemed like the perfect love had ended in betrayal. Evelyn saw the pain in his eyes as he spoke of it, and she realized that beneath his composed exterior was a heart that had never truly healed. Their connection didn't blossom through grand romantic gestures, but through the little things in their daily lives. One afternoon, after a tense business meeting, Oliver walked into the library to find Evelyn engrossed in an economics book, something he never thought would pique her interest. Unaware of his presence, she mumbled thoughtfully to herself, "Why doesn't he invest in social housing projects? I think it would be a smart move." Oliver couldn't help but smile, feeling a strange sense of amusement. The girl he had thought only cared about parties and shopping was capable of such insightful thoughts. Their dinners together, which had once felt forced, gradually became more natural. Evelyn started enjoying the meals prepared by the chef, sometimes playfully toying with her food, while Oliver simply watched, realizing he found himself more interested in observing her than in his work. They began taking quiet strolls through the garden on moonlit nights. Evelyn would excitedly point out different flowers, sharing their meanings and why they were special to her. At first, Oliver merely listened, but soon he found these moments brought him a sense of peace he hadn't known before. Once, when an unexpected rainstorm caught them off guard, they sought shelter under the porch. Evelyn, her hair soaked, laughed brightly, stretching out her hands to catch the raindrops. Oliver watched her, an unfamiliar softness creeping into his gaze. "Don't you find this exciting?" she giggled, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Oliver's voice was quieter than usual as he replied, "Maybe it's the first time I found so beautiful." Evelyn paused, her heart skipping a beat at his rare moment of sincerity. These small fleeting moments gradually brought them closer. Evelyn found herself lowering her defenses around Oliver, listening to him more and slowly understanding the calmness that surrounded him. More importantly, she began to realize how he silently protected her from the harsh whispers of society. For Oliver, what had started as a mere business transaction had transformed into something far more significant. He found himself caring about Evelyn in ways he never expected. Sometimes just a simple smile from her was enough to make his exhausting day feel a little lighter. Love didn't arrive suddenly or dramatically, but rather through the simplest things: late-night conversations, accidental glances, and those quiet moments in the garden where words weren't needed, yet they both understood each other. Evelyn Carter and Oliver Whitmore, two strangers burdened by past wounds, were slowly becoming an inseparable part of each other's lives. The marriage between Evelyn and Oliver, which had seemed to be finding a semblance of peace, was now threatened by unseen forces brewing beneath the surface. Evelyn's stepmother and Oliver's ex-lover Isabella had joined forces to shatter the fragile bond between them. One breezy afternoon, Evelyn lounged in a plush armchair by the window of the grand living room, a cigarette dangling lazily between her fingers. Wisps of smoke curled into the air, painting ghostly patterns that faded as quickly as they appeared. Her gaze drifted over the bustling city streets below, detached and indifferent to the world around her. But then the sharp clack of heels echoed across the polished wooden floor. Her stepmother entered, carrying a thick envelope in her perfectly manicured hands. She placed it on the table with an all-too-familiar smirk, her eyes gleaming with hidden malice. "Evelyn, do you really think this marriage is about love?" Her voice was smooth, almost a whisper, yet sharp enough to cut through Evelyn's facade. Evelyn exhaled a stream of smoke, Her emerald eyes flickering to her stepmother, with a look of careless defiance, she swung one leg over the other, her demeanor effortlessly nonchalant, as if none of it mattered. "Here we go again, another lecture," she drawled, her tone dripping with boredom. "Make it quick, I have an important appointment to get to." Her stepmother remained unfazed, gracefully pulling out a chair and sitting down across from her with an air of feigned sympathy. She slid the envelope toward Evelyn, her smile laced with quiet triumph. "I just want you to see the truth, darling. Don't let yourself be deceived by empty illusions." Evelyn glanced at the envelope, then let out a soft chuckle, tapping the cigarette against the rim of her half-empty wineglass. "Oh, let me guess what's inside. A contract, a blackmail letter, or perhaps some scandalous photos." Her voice was laced with mockery, but deep down a flicker of unease stirred within her. Her stepmother said nothing, simply watching with that infuriating smirk. The silence pressed against Evelyn's chest, making her throat tighten involuntarily. She reached for the envelope and dumped its contents onto the table without much care. The moment her eyes landed on the photos, the smirk on her lips as all slowly faded. There they were, Oliver and Isabella seated together in an upscale restaurant. The intimacy in their body language was undeniable. Oliver leaning in slightly, Isabella resting her head on his shoulder, her fingers grazing his wrist in a way that spoke of familiarity and something deeper. Evelyn's heart clenched painfully. She picked up a photo, studying every detail, searching for something, anything that could disprove the truth staring her in the face. But it was all too clear. Her grip tightened around the edges of the pictures, and for a fleeting moment, the mask of indifference cracked. She had allowed herself to believe, even if just a little, that Oliver had begun to care for her, and now all of that seemed like a cruel joke. Her stepmother shrugged, her tone laced with false sympathy. "Oliver was never truly yours, Evelyn. You're just a temporary distraction for him. If you're smart, you'll know what to do." Evelyn leaned back into the chair, tilting her head as she studied her stepmother with a defiant gleam in her eyes. "And what would you suggest, mother dearest? Should I cry and run away? Sorry to disappoint, but I'm not that kind of woman." She forced a smile, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Her stepmother chuckled lightly, rising from her seat. She placed a patronizing hand on Evelyn's shoulder, a final gesture of condescension. "Do what you will, Evelyn, just don't let yourself become too pitiful." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving behind a faint trail of expensive perfume. Evelyn sat frozen for a moment, staring blankly at the pile of photographs before her. The indifference she had so carefully crafted began to crumble. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced over the image of Oliver, looking at Isabella with a tenderness she had never seen directed at herself lately. He had been distant, working late nights, missing dinners, ignoring her calls. She had convinced herself it was just work, that Oliver was simply the cold, detached man he had always been, but now it all made sense. The late nights, the silence, the absence of bitter laugh escaped her lips. The rebellious, carefree Evelyn Carter had actually allowed herself to believe in something as foolish as love. She shook her head, pouring herself another glass of wine and downing it in one go, hoping the alcohol would dull the ache in her chest. But no amount of liquor could erase the image of Oliver and Isabella that now burned itself into her mind. She rose abruptly, pulling back the heavy curtains to gaze out at the dazzling city skyline, the glittering lights of London, the endless stream of people. Everything kept moving forward, yet she felt stuck at a crossroads with nowhere to go. Her grip tightened on the curtain, her breathing ragged. She knew she had to make a choice, but did she have the strength to walk away from it all? Picking up her phone, Evelyn's fingers hovered over Oliver's contact. She hesitated, her thumb wavering over the screen before she let out a quiet, bitter sigh and tossed the phone onto the couch. If Oliver truly cared, he would have to prove it himself. As for her, perhaps it was time to leave. Like a storm that refused to be tamed by anyone, while Evelyn struggled with the turmoil in her heart, Oliver found himself facing a far more tangible threat. Isabella had not only returned to disrupt his marriage, but she had set her sights on his career as well. One bleak evening, while Oliver was buried in work at his office, Isabella appeared unannounced, her sharp gaze prowling like a predator. "We need to talk, Alex." She seated herself without invitation, sliding a thick folder across The desk toward him. "If you don't want your company to collapse, you know what you have to do." Oliver opened the folder. His face an unreadable mask. As he skimmed through the contents, Isabella had already lured several key stakeholders to her side, orchestrating a financial crisis that could bring Whitmore Enterprises to its knees. But what made his blood run cold was her thinly veiled threat aimed at Evelyn. "If you don't want your precious wife to have an accident anytime soon, I suggest you think carefully." Isabella's voice dripped with venom, her eyes dark with malice. Oliver clenched his fists, struggling to keep his composure. He knew Isabella well enough to understand that she never made empty threats. Rumors of a major investor pulling out of the company had already begun to circulate, causing unrest among the shareholders. The pressure was mounting, and Oliver found himself standing at a crossroad between saving his company and protecting the woman who had unexpectedly found a place in his heart. The situation reached a breaking point when a major investor suddenly announced their withdrawal from a crucial project, sending shockwaves through the company. The financial reports painted a dire picture: stocks plummeting, red figures flashing across the screens, and emergency meetings stretching late into the night. Oliver practically lived in his office, fighting tooth and nail to stabilize the empire his family had built over the years. Sleepless nights became his new normal, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like never before. Despite his efforts to shield Evelyn from the chaos, the growing distance between them did not go unnoticed. Oliver's absence from home, his late-night phone calls, and the relentless exhaustion etched into his features, all of it fed into Evelyn's growing doubts. Each passing day she found herself questioning if the words her stepmother had whispered to her were true. Anne's growing doubts were only fueled by Oliver's increasing distance. The malicious words of her stepmother suddenly seemed more plausible than ever. Oliver had become colder, more distant, and the lonely dinners in the vast mansion made her feel like nothing more than an accessory. She began to question if she was indeed just a plaything in his grand scheme, as her stepmother had so cruelly suggested one afternoon. In search of some fresh air and an escape from her thoughts, Evelyn found herself in a quiet cafe by the roadside. As she sipped her coffee absent-mindedly, she overheard a group of Whitmore employees seated at a nearby table, engaged in a hushed but intense conversation. They were discussing the state of the company, the looming threat of bankruptcy, and Oliver's relentless efforts to secure a financial solution. Evelyn's heart nearly stopped when she heard one of them say, "If we don't secure new investment within a week, we're all out of jobs." Those words echoed in her mind, repeating over and over like a relentless drumbeat. She stood frozen, the bustling city noise fading into a distant hum as the realization hit her like a thunderbolt. Oliver wasn't distant because he was tired of her or because of the wager she had long suspected. He was fighting a silent war to save his company, to protect thousands of employees. A wave of guilt washed over Evelyn, tightening around her chest like an iron grip. She had been so absorbed in her own insecurities and doubts that she had failed to notice the burden Oliver was shouldering. She recalled the long nights he spent at the office, the fatigue etched into his face in the silent stares that she had mistaken for indifference. But now everything made perfect sense. He was struggling, fighting, and he had been doing it alone. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the edge of the chair, trying to steady herself against the flood of emotions rushing through her. She had judged him too harshly, let her insecurities clouded her vision, and turned her back on him when he needed her most for so long. Evelyn had believed that she was the loneliest person in the world, but now she realized that Oliver's solitude was just as profound. His was the loneliness of responsibility, the weight of expectations crushing down on him. Taking a deep breath, her resolve hardened. She couldn't just stand by anymore, not out of obligation or guilt, but because she cared deeply. Undeniably, the man she once thought she despised had, without her realizing it, carved a place in her heart. She knew what she had to do. It was time to prove to everyone and to herself that she wasn't just a reckless socialite, a girl with no purpose beyond fleeting pleasures. Evelyn decided to use the inheritance her mother had left her, an untouched fortune she had always guarded closely, to save Oliver's company, not because he needed her help, but because she wanted to be his silent strength, just as he had been hers in ways she hadn't noticed before. With newfound determination, Evelyn left the cafe, her steps firm, her gaze unwavering. The doubts and fears that had plagued her were gone, replaced by a singular purpose: to stand by Oliver and face whatever came their way together. Without wasting another moment, she returned to the Whitmore estate. Heading straight to her study, pulling out her financial records, she stared at the vast wealth her mother had left behind. The money had always been a reminder of her past, of the love she once had, and she had never touched it out of respect and longing. But now it could serve a greater purpose. Evelyn picked up the phone, her voice calm yet resolute as she spoke to her lawyer. Transfer a significant portion of my inheritance to Whitmore Group. I want it done immediately, no delays. The lawyer hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by her sudden interest. In serious financial matters, Evelyn had always been known for her lavish spending, never for her business acumen. But she simply smirked at his hesitation, her tone unwavering as she continued. This isn't an impulsive decision. I know exactly what I'm doing. That very night the funds were transferred. Evelyn didn't inform Oliver. She knew he would never accept her help easily, and she didn't need him to. This wasn't about his pride or her validation. It was about standing in the shadows, being the silent pillar he could lean on without even realizing it. As she stared out of the window into the dark city skyline, Evelyn allowed herself a small smile for the first time in a long while. She felt like she was finally doing something that mattered, not just for him but for them. The next day at the Whitmore Group headquarters, news of the mysterious investments spread like wildfire across departments. Oliver sat in the boardroom with the senior shareholders, his face composed as always, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise. A substantial sum had just been transferred into the struggling project fund, enough to sustain operations for the coming months and even aid in restructuring their business strategy. You've really outdone yourself, Oliver. I didn't expect you'd be able to secure such a large investment in such a short time, an older shareholder remarked. Nodding approvingly, Oliver clenched his hands beneath the table, his mind racing with questions. He knew without a doubt that he had not yet found a new investor, and this money couldn't have appeared out of thin air. The timely intervention of the investment had pulled Whitmore Group back from the brink of collapse. Key projects were restarted, shareholders regained confidence, and the market slowly showed signs of recovery. While the company was stabilizing, Oliver was left with one pressing question: who was behind this mysterious investment? He had combed through every financial record, contacted potential partners, yet no clue surfaced. The only detail left behind was a simple signature: E. Carter. It couldn't possibly be Evelyn, he thought. In his eyes she was still the reckless socialite, uninterested in finance or business affairs. Yet a nagging thought gnawed at the back of his mind: could it really be her? Meanwhile, Isabella was seething with rage upon discovering that her plan to ruin Oliver had failed. She had underestimated Evelyn, a costly mistake. Worse yet, Oliver had not abandoned his wife, which deeply wounded Isabella's pride. In a fit of fury, she decided to take more drastic action. Late one evening, after attending a charity event, Evelyn was on her way back to the Whitmore estate when a speeding truck suddenly veered into her lane from the opposite direction. There was no time to react. The truck collided forcefully with the side of her car, sending it spinning into the guardrail. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. The car flipped onto its side, shards of glass scattered everywhere, and blood trickled down Evelyn's pale face. Before losing consciousness, only one thought crossed her mind: Oliver's smile at the hospital. Oliver sat silently beside Evelyn's hospital bed. His usually composed demeanor shattered. Her face was ghostly pale, a deep gash on her forehead standing in stark contrast to her otherwise flawless skin. He reached for her hand, his own trembling with a mix of fear and regret. What have you done to yourself, Evelyn? He whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The past few days he had been consumed by work, battling the financial crisis orchestrated by Isabella. But now, sitting beside Evelyn's still body, Oliver realized how insignificant the company was compared to her. The door creaked open, and George, his assistant, entered with a thick file in hand. His expression was tense, his eyes filled with urgency. Mr. Whitmore, there's something you need to know, George said, placing the file on the table. Oliver flipped through the pages quickly, his sharp gaze freezing when he saw the name of the new investor, Evelyn Carter, his breath caught in his throat, his grip tightening on the papers as every transaction, every financial trail confirmed the truth. Evelyn was the one who had saved his company. This can't be, Oliver murmured. Memories flashing through his mind, her exhausted eyes. When he came home late, the disappointment that flickered across her face when he grew distant. George cleared his throat, his voice cautious. Mrs. Whitmore made the investment through an anonymous financial trust. She didn't want you to know. Oliver's hands trembled as he held the documents. She had sacrificed everything without expecting recognition. The realization hit him like a tidal wave, filling his chest with both pain and an overwhelming sense of love. He gently brushed a strand of hair from Evelyn's face, his voice barely above a whisper, filled with guilt and tenderness. Why did you do this for me without saying a word? I've been so blind, Evelyn. I didn't see that you were always there for me. All the walls he had built around himself, all the emotions he had buried, threatened to spill over. He had been so focused on fighting Isabella that he had neglected the one person who truly cared for him. Staring at Evelyn's frail figure, Oliver felt an ache unlike any he had ever known. He had let her feel alone, left her drowning in doubts and insecurities, while she silently stood by his side, protecting him in ways he never imagined. Evelyn, I'm sorry, please wake up. He leaned closer, pressing a soft kiss to her cold hand. Though she remained in a coma, Oliver knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would never let her slip away again from this moment on. He was determined to protect and cherish her with everything he had. When sitting beside Evelyn's hospital bed, watching her lying unconscious, a fire of fury ignited within Oliver. He couldn't just sit back and watch the woman he loved suffer without taking action. The incident was too much of a coincidence to be an accident. Isabella had always been ruthless, and this time Oliver knew she had crossed the line. George, I want you to conduct a thorough investigation into Evelyn's accident, Oliver said, his voice cold and sharp. Check all traffic cameras, find any irregularities. I need to know who dared to do this. George nodded without hesitation. He knew Oliver meant every word. Within a day, information started coming to light. The private investigation team Oliver had hired uncovered crucial evidence. A hidden security camera from a nearby street captured footage of a suspicious black car tailing Evelyn's vehicle just moments before the accident. The license plate was quickly traced back to a rental company, and the person who had signed the lease was none other than Isabella. Oliver's jaw clenched, his eyes darkening with fury. This time she had gone too far, and he wouldn't let it slide. I want solid evidence to bring her to justice. George wasted no time gathering witness statements from people near the scene. A homeless man had seen the black car accelerating toward Evelyn's vehicle, and fortunately had scribbled down the plate number on an old piece of paper. With all the evidence in hand, Oliver didn't hesitate. He immediately called his legal team and contacted the police to initiate a formal investigation. That morning, as Isabella enjoyed her luxurious breakfast at a high-end hotel, she was caught off guard when several police officers barged in. Her face turned pale as she saw Oliver walking in alongside the officers. He stood tall, his gaze icy cold. Did you really think I wouldn't find out the truth? His voice was like a blade cutting through the air. Isabella attempted to remain composed, but the steely authority and resentment in Oliver's eyes made her falter. Oliver, what are you talking about? I don't understand. She feigned innocence, but it was already too late. One of the officers stepped forward and read the arrest warrant aloud. Isabella Grayson, you are under arrest for attempted homicide and conspiracy to commit grievous bodily harm. You have the right to remain silent, but anything you say can and will be used against you in court. Isabella screamed, struggling in vain as the officers handcuffed her. She turned to Oliver, desperation and anger swirling in her eyes. You can't do this to me. We loved each other, Alex. Oliver stepped closer, looking directly into her deceitful eyes. Love, he scoffed. I once loved you, but that love died the day you betrayed me. Now you're nothing but a pathetic criminal. As the police led Isabella away, Oliver stood still, his heart heavy. He knew the battle wasn't entirely over, but at least the person who hurt Evelyn would finally face the consequences. After ensuring that Isabella was prosecuted by the law, Oliver immediately returned to the hospital. He sat down beside Evelyn's bed, holding her hand tightly, and whispered, "Can you hear me, Evelyn? I found the one behind all of this. You're safe." Now his voice was so filled with tenderness, yet laced with pain. He realized he loved her far more than he had ever admitted to himself. Evelyn had done so much for him, and yet he had let her fall into danger. A single tear slid down Oliver's cheek. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. Please wake up. Give me a chance to make things right." Under the soft hospital lighting, Evelyn's fingers faintly twitched one early morning as gentle sunlight streamed through the hospital window, illuminating Evelyn's pale face. Oliver sat beside her, his eyes weary but unwavering. His hand remained tightly wrapped around hers, feeling the faint but steady pulse beneath her skin. Suddenly, her slender fingers moved slightly. Her eyelids fluttered before slowly opening, meeting Oliver's worry yet loving gaze. Time seemed to stand still for a moment before her weak voice broke the silence. "You're here." Oliver held his breath, his heart skipping a beat at the fragile sound of her voice. His eyes glistened with unused tears, but he quickly composed himself, squeezing her hand gently. "Yes, I'm here. I'll always be here." Evelyn tried to smile, but her lips trembled. She closed her eyes briefly, letting herself feel the warmth of his presence. Memories flooded back: the accident, the doubts, the hurt. But now, looking into his eyes, all the pain seemed to fade away. "You know now, don't you?" she whispered, her gaze filled with sorrow, yet no longer avoiding his. Oliver nodded, his voice thick with emotion, but resolute. I know. It was you who saved the company, who stood behind me when I was too blind to see." Evelyn smiled faintly, though tears welled in her eyes. "I just wanted to help you, because I knew you'd never accept it if I told you outright." Oliver squeezed her hand tighter, emotions overwhelming him. Once he had thought of her as nothing more than a reckless socialite, but now he saw Evelyn as the strong, compassionate woman she truly was. "I was wrong, Evelyn. I was so blind not to trust you, not to share my burdens with you. I'm sorry for making you bear everything alone." Evelyn gazed into his eyes, seeing the sincerity, the regret, and the deep love he held for her. In that moment, she knew he was genuine. "You know, I once thought leaving you would be the best choice, but deep down I couldn't. My love you, Oliver." Oliver couldn't hold back anymore. He leaned down, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead, tears falling freely. "I love you, Evelyn. I have for a long time. I just didn't have the courage to admit it." Evelyn smiled, her eyes shimmering in the morning light. They had endured misunderstandings and heartbreak, but what mattered was that they were here together. A few months later, Evelyn had fully recovered. Throughout her recovery, Oliver never left her side for even a moment. Their love grew stronger, with no more secrets or distance standing between them. Today, Evelyn stood on stage at a major charity event she had been quietly planning for months. She looked elegant in a sophisticated gown, no longer the rebellious A's of the past, but a mature, independent woman with unwavering determination. As she stepped onto the stage, her eyes instinctively searched for him, and there he was, standing in the far corner of the room, watching her with quiet pride. He didn't need to say anything. His smile spoke volumes. His gaze was filled with love, admiration, and immense pride. Evelyn took a deep breath, her voice steady as she spoke into the microphone. "I was once a lost girl, sure of my place in this world, but I've learned that love, trust, and compassion are what make life truly meaningful." From the audience, Oliver gave her a small nod, his heart swelling with happiness. He had found not just a wife in Evelyn, but a partner, an equal, and above all, the love of his life. On a gentle evening, as the London sky was adorned with a shimmering blanket of stars, Oliver led Evelyn to the small garden behind the Whitmore estate. The soft golden lights illuminated the blooming roses, creating a breathtakingly romantic scene. Evelyn stood there, her long hair cascading down in the evening breeze, her eyes still carrying traces of the sorrow she had endured. Oliver gazed at her, his heart brimming with love and a deep sense of regret. "Evelyn," he finally broke the silence, his voice warm and sincere. She turned to face him, her piercing blue eyes filled with curiosity. "I proposed to you once before, but for all the wrong reasons. Tonight I want to do it again, but this time for the only reason that truly matters." Oliver slowly knelt down, pulling out a small red velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a diamond ring sparkled under the moonlight. "Gone Was the coldness gone? Were the obligations in the bee? Only pure, heartful love remained in his gaze. Evelyn Carter, can you forgive me and give us another chance? I love you not because of a wager, not out of duty, but because of who you are. You've changed my life in ways I never imagined. I want to be with you, love you, and protect you for the rest of my life. Evelyn stood still, her breath caught in her throat, tears welling in her eyes, not tears of pain this time, but of happiness. She had been through so much, so many misunderstandings, but at this moment she could feel the raw sincerity in Oliver's words. A gentle smile formed on her lips, one that held happiness and a multitude of emotions. Slowly, she reached out her hand, her voice soft yet resolute. I accept, Oliver. Let's start over. With real love, relief washed over Oliver's face, and a radiant smile spread across his lips as he slid the ring onto Evelyn's finger. He stood up and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, as if silently vowing never to let her go again. Thank you, Evelyn, thank you for giving me another chance. Evelyn rested her head against his chest, closing her eyes, savoring the strong, steady heartbeat and the comforting warmth of the man she loved. We'll face everything together under the starlit sky. They shared a tender kiss, marking a new beginning. No more pretense, no more doubts, only genuine love and hope for the future. Their story stands as proof that love is not a game or a possession, but under understanding and companionship. No matter the past, people always have the chance to change and find true happiness if they are willing to fight for it and cherish what they have. Thank you for following our story. Did this story touch your heart? Leave a comment below if you enjoyed the